Takes a second. Hey, good evening, everyone. Hey, it's Gina with Rise Up from Trauma Coaching. And on this episode of Healing Strategies, we would love to welcome Casey Head. So welcome, Casey.
Well, thank you so much for having me, Gina. I'm grateful to be here with you tonight.
I'm so glad that you're here. So let me tell you a little bit about why we do this. I share this every single time, but it's always good to reiterate why we do this and how we kind of came to be. So we started doing this as trauma survivors, and through working on our own healing journeys and my own healing journey, I have come to find out that not only is it about traditional talk therapy or traditional coaching and things like that, but we need to implement other modalities, other healing strategies into our healing journey, incorporate those. And so Casey is joining us. And so when I met her, she's very inspirational. She is a 3-time cancer and stroke survivor. And so she has learned to take the trauma that she's endured from the things that she experienced and literally use that to pour into other survivors, other stroke survivors, other cancer survivors. And so we welcome her with open arms because, going through the things that I went through, going through the things that she went through, it's never easy, but it's helped us build that resiliency. It helped us build to be who we are today. And if it wasn't for that, unfortunately, we wouldn't be sitting here today. So Casey, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So my name is Casey Head. I am, like you said, a 3-time cancer survivor, stroke survivor. And I think my journey is very long, so I'll give you the cliff notes. I was diagnosed. I spent over 168 days in the hospital total over the course of almost 5 years. I've done over 32 different chemotherapies. I have done 10 rounds of total body radiation. I've had a stem cell transplant, and I've also tried 2 immunotherapies. 1 failed, 1 succeeded. And there's a point in my care where we actually had to reach out for compassionate care from the government and a drug manufacturer to save my life. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah, that's like the cliff notes.
Wow. That's a lot. I mean, that is a lot considering, so you've had cancer 3 times.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And so I guess to think about the numbers that you shared and then going through that. So tell us some more. Tell us some more about yourself and a little bit more about your journey.
Yeah. Prior to cancer. So I was diagnosed at 31 with acute lymphoblastic leukemia. I was married for like a year, I think, at that point. I was in the midst of, developing a career. We had just bought a house, like checking the boxes of life.
Yep.
Right?
Yep, absolutely.
And everything seemed to be going quite well. And so this diagnosis was it felt like out of nowhere, even though now in hindsight, I can see it unfolding. And for me personally, it wasn't a matter of if, it was a matter of when and what type of cancer, based on some things that I had experienced as a child, which we can absolutely discuss. I'm an open book. Leading into my 20s, leading into my 30s, right? So it all kind of like, I see it so clearly now, whereas when you're doing it day to day, you don't see anything.
Nope.
So as you can imagine, all of that came to a grinding halt when I was diagnosed. And, a little bit about me, like I'm a very resilient person. This wasn't the first trauma that I had been through. And so for me, it was getting through the journey was the easy part. It was the surviving part that really threw me for a loop. All of my coping mechanisms weren't working. I was like, why isn't this working again? Yep. And I was completely failing. I felt like I was failing.
Right.
Like there's no failure at living, but I felt like I was failing because I was miserable. My expectations didn't meet the reality of what my experience was, because during my treatment for almost 5 years, every survivor I had met was like, just wait till you're done. You're going to be great. Everything's going to be great. Like, never clued me into anything that was going to happen eventually. And so when I survived and that didn't happen for me, I I felt like I was broken and I didn't know what was wrong with me. And you're right, like I internalized it as something's wrong with me. Everyone
Yeah.
else is living life. I messed up.
Right.
So I actually ended up, Gina, honestly having a nervous breakdown because of it.
Oh,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and that night that I had that nervous breakdown, I was the first time I admitted to my now ex-husband and my dad and his mom that I was not okay, that I would have rather died
Right.
than live. And
Right.
they couldn't understand it either. You know, my dad was sitting there saying, like, everything's going to be fine. You're going to be fine. And I kept telling him that night, I'm like, I am not fine. This is not fine. Like,
Right.
are we not seeing what's wrong with this picture? And so I just knew that night as I was like lying down, face down in a pillow, crying in front of everyone, like something had to give. I had to figure it out or I wasn't going to make it. You know,
Right.
I was, and Gina, I was already in therapy and I had this nervous breakdown.
Oh,
So,
wow.
you know, I can't imagine had I not been in therapy, what I would have been feeling times 100, right? Like,
Right. Right.
you know, so that was my big struggle was like, how do I get back to living life? Like, my body is a complete mess. My mind is not, I'm not in a good place, clearly. And emotionally, like, I don't know how to unpack all of this because the reality was starting to set in of like, you could have died. Like,
Hmm.
literally could have died, should have died probably based on everything in paper,
Right.
but you're here and now you want to die again. Like, this doesn't make sense. It was so disconnected for me.
Yeah, and it will. So, and that's the thing. It's, when you go through something like that, and it's the overload
Yeah.
of going through everything that you went through. Your emotions were maxed out, and it was just like, I'm done. I'm done. And so I'm proud of you for not giving up. That's a huge, huge thing. And, and like you said, therapy, therapy saved your life. Because imagine if you weren't in it. Like, holy mackerel, your emotions would have, yeah. It's not even about emotions, but, the trauma, the trauma staying in your body and then going through this as a traumatic experience. And then saying, I would like to die, even though I know that you didn't, but going through the midst of your storm and then feeling like, I don't even know who I am anymore. And now you have family that's going, oh, it's going to be okay. No, you don't understand. You don't
No.
understand me. You don't understand the things that I'm going through. And so it's really hard when we go through our most challenging experiences and for somebody to say it's going to be okay. Yeah, it's like, no, I get that that's what you're saying, but sometimes that's not what we want to hear.
No, it's not. And I think, you just want someone to go, yeah, what you're feeling probably does suck or
Mhm.
something, but not that, not like it's
Right.
going to be okay.
Yes, yes, and validating you and,
Yeah.
and stuff like that too, and that's what, and that's what most people, and I catch myself learning, I'm teaching myself even as, as a trauma coach myself is learning to validate more.
Mm,
And it's hard. It's hard when you just want to say everything's going to be okay,
that's not.
and it's like, oh, I got to learn to say, like, how can I help you? I understand, you have every right to feel the way that you do. You have every right to feel frustrated.
Right.
And so obviously not being seen and heard made things worse for you as well.
Right. Like, it just exacerbated what I was feeling. And I was like, no one gets it. Like, no one understands around me. And no one was holding space for me to do that and feel that. And, I get why they wanted me to just say, like, it's going to be okay. But when you're in the midst of it and you're at your darkest, lowest point, and there were some humbling moments during my treatment, but to come out of it and have one of the darkest moments that I've had throughout the course of everything, like I can endure physical stuff all day long, but it was like the weight of that day just got me, and to not feel like I even had an outlet to express that was really eye-opening for me in a
Yes,
sense, because I was like, I got to figure this out. It's a party of one now. And here we
it
go.
is. Yep, yep. And that's kind of like with me too. I think when my trauma started, um, it was I lost my sense of self.
Yeah.
So I didn't know who I was anymore. And so I totally understand because that's how it was. Like, who am I? I didn't even recognize myself anymore. And I would say that to people and they're like, well, yeah, we know you know who I am, but who am I really on the inside? I was lost. I felt like I was, things were ripped away from me. My life was chaotic. And so I totally understand. It's like, wait a minute, like, yeah. So I totally get it. Like when you lose who you are.
Right.
And unless you've been there, nobody can understand that. When you tell somebody, oh, I've lost my sense of self, they're like, oh, what's that? So it's like, but I totally understand when you say that, exactly what you experienced.
Right. Because for the past 5 years prior to that, I was literally just a cancer patient. Like the longest remission before that was 7 weeks before I went right back in. So I never felt like I had a break from being that patient. And it's not even just for me, it was so much more complicated, I feel like, because it wasn't just losing the sense of self in this, this path that I was on, but it was also like a complete disconnection from my own body, my own to feel like I even had efficacy over my persons. Like, there were so many doctor's appointments where I went in just like, do whatever you want. Like, that's not a normal flippant
No.
statement to say ever
No.
anywhere. Do whatever you want.
Right.
Like,
Oh,
what?
man. Wow.
So,
Wow. Yeah.
yeah.
And that's wow. So, so how long altogether did you have cancer for?
It was approximately 4.5 to 5 years.
Okay.
Because the goal when I got into remission the last time, they were like the plan was originally to go to another stem cell transplant,
Okay.
but my team pivoted last minute. I don't know if this was their original plan and they just didn't tell me. But they were like, we're just gonna wait and see what happens, which is like the worst thing that you can tell a
Well,
cancer survivor.
yeah, that's what I was going to say. I would be scared.
Yeah. That's why I say like 4.5, 5, because there
Yes.
was a solid 6 month stretch where I would be still going back to the hospital every week, like on pins and needles, waiting for them to tell me my cancer was back. Because it's just like
Right.
there's no plan. You guys are just waiting. Like this doesn't make sense. Help
Right.
me.
Absolutely. So how long have you been in remission?
I'm officially this year will be my 7th year at the end of the year.
Oh, yes.
I know. I don't
Oh,
even the sad part is, Gina, I don't even know the day because I was like, it doesn't matter because I'm just gonna relapse again. So I don't even know. I just know the
yep.
time frame.
Yep. That's all right though. I mean, that's okay. I mean, it's one of those things that, I mean, I get it because you were in that mindset that, oh, because what did you say? There was only like a week or two when you
7
went
weeks.
back in. 7 weeks. Okay. So in your mind, you're thinking, okay, the ball's going to drop. I don't want to celebrate and I don't want to remember this because it's going to come again. So, but I mean, as long as you know, hey, the time frame may be 7 years this year, whatever year, it's like, okay, that's huge. That is huge. So let's kind of shift into what you did. You kind of had your diagnosis, you went through your recovery. Then when did you have your stroke?
I actually had my stroke 4 months into my treatment. So it was directly from one of the chemotherapies that I was getting.
Okay.
And it left me temporarily paralyzed for on my left side. So I had to relearn how to use everything. Yeah, that was honestly the most humbling part of the journey was just not being able to do anything independently. I relied on everyone just to even sit up, right? Like, I mean, my ex-husband and I aren't together anymore, but during that time, like without him, I don't know if I would have made it through,
Right.
And so I give him all the credit in the world for just showing up and putting his big boy pants on. But it definitely wasn't an experience that I would have shown anyone still to this day. Like
Yes.
It's hard to like learn how to, there was one moment where I was in the hospital and I started crying. He goes, "What's wrong?" And I go, all of our friends are getting married and having babies, and I'm literally relearning how to freaking tie my shoe. What is wrong with this picture?
Oh.
And I was just like, what is going on? Like, those unbelievable moments where you're just like, I'm actually doing this right now.
Right. Oh. So how long was that recovery?
I was in the hospital for 3 weeks, and then I begged them to let me out because I was like, oh my God, I need sleep. I need things like to help me do this better. So they let me out. And then after that, I did 8 weeks of intense outpatient physical therapy, 3 hours, 5 days a week.
Oh, man.
While still going through chemotherapy because I was not in remission.
Oh my golly. I want to say you have like some, well, you're brave, very strong, but then again, you're going to be like, nah, but oh, wow. I mean, like, I'm sitting here thinking like most people going through something like that probably would have been like, I'm done. And, I know you felt like that, but you continued to thrive and continued and continued and continued. And then it was like you had that fight in you that you wanted to do better and to do better and stuff, even with all the setbacks.
Mm-hmm.
And stuff like that. Wow.
Yeah, there was never a moment where I was like, this is enough. This is enough. It was like, no. Like I shifted my mindset after a while to go, this is my job right now. My job is to take care of myself, to not die, to put myself in a position to succeed, because I was like, my medical team, they're doing everything they can to ensure that this cancer goes away. How can I not participate in that? How could I not be a good team player and exercise and try to eat as best I can and keep my weight at a certain point? Because obviously, like, it's the last thing you want to do is eat sometimes.
Right.
And, so I just was like, how can I be the best team player? I showed up to every appointment. I did everything they asked me above and beyond. And it was just, I knew that if they're going to try and help me, I needed to try and help me too.
That's good. And knowing you had that support was huge too.
Mm-hmm.
I can't think of the word. My brain's like not even. I was sitting there going, oh, I've been sitting there thinking of the word. I'm like, oh my goodness. Was the cancer that you had a rare cancer?
So it is a acute lymphoblastic leukemia is typically a children's cancer.
Okay.
Children from 3 to about 5 usually get it,
Okay.
which it's still very rare. And to be diagnosed at 31, it's even rarer. So I think statistically at that time, it was like 1,000 people globally get diagnosed with it a year at that time, 10 years ago. So I don't know what the statistic is now, but it's just, I just felt even more on my own because, I love that everyone in like breast cancer communities, they have this giant cohort of people. And I didn't ever feel like I had that. And it just, I was jealous, to be honest. Like, I was like, where are my people? Oh, there's not enough of us to have anything.
Right. Yeah, that's the thing. It's like, oh man, especially as an adult.
Yeah.
So it's like, oh wow, yeah. That was I was sitting there thinking, I'm like, what word do I use? And then all of a sudden rare popped in my head. I was like, thank you, because I was sitting there trying to think, what word, how can I phrase that word? Or, to ask her, I was like, oh geez, now I'm going to look like a numbskull.
No, not at all. Not at all.
That's just my lovely brain. It doesn't, sometimes it's like, I get in the midst of it. And then I was like, oh, what is that? And then my brain just kind of, that's the good old trauma brain that I have and stuff too. So it's like, it's all good. It's all good. And stuff like that too. So there was something else I was going to say in reference. So let's back up a little bit. Do you, can you attribute to Because I know there was some there. I'm assuming there was some childhood trauma.
Yes.
Okay.
So,
Are you?
go
So
ahead.
let me just ask you really quick before you answer. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No,
Um,
go.
do you think that was attributed to the things that you endured?
I think it absolutely did.
Right.
You know, for 10 years, during my childhood, I was physically, mentally, and verbally abused. And so, and emotionally too, gaslit a lot. And I do think that ended up leading to very bad decisions in my 20s because I'm operating on a traumatic hardwiring.
Yeah.
And so that led to very bad decisions. Not, I wouldn't say very bad, but just not the best decisions as
Right.
in my 20s that I think contributed to it. You know, if you're always stressed out and you're always worried and you're always like anxious and everything you're doing is operating from that point of view, you can't
Yes.
see anything clearly.
Mm-mm. No, you can't. And so why I asked you that is because I'm actually doing a study. I'm studying for myself to actually teach a class come
Mm.
September, and so the statistics show that 75 to 98% of people in that range, um, when they have gone through childhood trauma, and childhood trauma affects the brain, the psychological, and not only does it affect the psychological, but week after week we say the body keeps the score, so it affects the
Mhm.
physiological portion too. So now they're saying 75 to 98% of people, so that leaves 2% that don't. Um, that the mind is what controls a lot of the illnesses, diseases, cancer, OCD, anxiety, depression. There's so many things that you can worry yourself. I mean, obviously, excessive stress. So, and so I'm reading this and I'm going, holy mackerel! Like this is huge. Like childhood trauma survivors, with all of their health issues, especially if you have a high ACEs score. And so
Mhm.
people that don't take their ACEs score, and I'm like, that's one thing you really need to look, because if you look at the statistics of that, it makes sense why sometimes as trauma survivors we go through these health ailments, and things like that too. So it just looked at it and I was like, and it was saying it's the mind, like because of what the trauma does to our mind and stuff. And I was like, wow, that's huge. And to think that 2% of it was like more of 2%, I think, was saying that it was environmental and DNA.
Which makes sense. But if you think about, we don't know everything about DNA, and some people
Right.
are like, well, I don't have the gene. But you have to think about like where our genes come from, our parents.
Yep.
What did they go through, right? What are they
Right.
passing down to us? Like, our great grandparents, like it can pass down 4 to 8 generations later. So like, you might say like, oh, I don't have the gene, or oh, it's this, it's that, but the genes mutate because of things that we have happened to us in our lives. Like, why do you think some people can tolerate stress more than others? Like, it's hardwired into our DNA. And
Yep,
there's
it
no
is.
doubt I have that ancestral trauma too. Like my grandmother was an internment camp survivor, so I'm getting it on both sides, like my
You
mother
are.
and my father. It's like I just got it all.
You did. Holy mackerel. Well, I'm glad that you're here still. So that's that, despite, but it is, people do not realize that. They don't look at like the DNA. They don't look at the genogram, which is taking the intergenerational things and plotting them like you would your ancestry, and looking and saying, oh, if this one has it, whether it's, where the childhood trauma comes from, whether it's cancer, whether it's alcoholism, drug addiction, whatever addiction, and looking at those and saying, oh, now I see where it's coming from. And so that's one thing that I did it for myself, the genogram too, and it really started making sense, seeing the intergenerational thing. And so it really put things into perspective, the things that I've endured. And so that's one of the things. And so it goes along with DNA, and
Mhm.
seeing, okay, if it skipped this generation, where is it coming now?
Right? Like it's it's so clear and it's so complicated. So,
Yes, it is. And it's just like, man, but yeah. So if anybody out there is interested in doing a geniogram, they're not hard. It is kind of time consuming because you have to kind of think back on, like your grandparents and great grandparents are kind of trying to figure out, and especially if they're gone. But for me, I started remembering as I did it, I started remembering and looking back, look at how my grandmothers were, and then it was reflection of my parents. Oh, look at my aunts and uncles, and it was like, oh, wait a minute, like, and it was huge. Not to blast my family by any means, by any means, but then I was like, wow, like this all makes sense now. So it can be time consuming, but again, it does. It goes back from the DNA, and that's where the intergenerational piece comes in.
right.
And stuff, because not bringing in the biblical aspect of things, but I was reading in the same book in the study that I'm doing, and it says like the things that we're living today are the things that we're enduring, and the things that we're going through are actually from 3 or 4 generations ago. So it hits exactly the point of what you just said. 3, 4 to 8 generations behind us, we're living all of their crap from then. Unfortunately, we're picking up the pieces. So I just hope that between what you and I have endured, especially you, that the cycle ends and you can be that cycle breaker.
Yeah, that's and it's a heavy burden to bear, but I said, I trust me, I can get through anything. This is nothing. So I just made a commitment that I was going to continue down that healing path of not just myself, but ancestrally speaking, and try to hopefully change the course of the trajectory going forward. And that's all I can do, and hope it does help.
Yep. And you are on the right path. And that's what I say too. I want to be a cycle breaker and a change maker, and stuff like that. This is why I do what I'm doing. And I want to be able to make a change and have my guests make a change in the communities, not just, continuing on and on and on. So that will lead us into our next kind of realm of things, is the healing process and things that you've, and all your certifications and the things that you do. And so tell us some more about yourself, about, after your cancer, after your stroke, and after your healing, and you're in remission and things like that. And when did you start realizing that you wanted to use that to help other people, help other cancer survivors?
Yeah, so like for me, the physical recovery part was the easiest. Personally, I was always an athlete growing up. So that came very natural to me, although there were some nuances learning how to do it in menopause at 35 and some other nuances, but that was the easy part. It was the emotions and the mindset that needed to shift that was really challenging for me. But honestly, how it all unfolded is the more I started organically just sharing on social media the struggle and what I was doing as the solution, the more women were just like, wait, what are you doing? Why are you doing that? Like, they wanted more, because at that time, it was 6-7 years ago, no one was talking about it. No one. Everyone was just like, I'm grateful to be alive. And I'm like, I am grateful to be alive, but I'm also very disgruntled and angry and upset, emotional, like you name it, I felt it. And I wanted to do things differently, because I made it a point. I consciously said, if I'm going to share this on social media, I'm going to literally be extremely vulnerable with it, be very honest with how I felt, because it's not for me. It's for the one person who needs to hear it. The one person who feels like I felt, like on an island by themselves, and that something was wrong with them. And from that day forward, I just said, that's the commitment. It's for that one person. And so, the more women that I was helping, I was like, I think there's something here. But I'm like, I can't keep doing this like one-off thing. Like this is not like efficient.
Yes.
And I needed better systems in place. So that's when, I started to actually put it into a 13-week program and do things like that. And then start to really just go, everything that I did is inside of this. Like, there's no anything else. Like, everything I did is here. And the things that I keep learning, they get added. So, and you get access to it forever. So as I grow, you're growing, we're all learning, we're all thriving. It's a continuous journey.
It is. And I don't think people understand that.
Yeah. I mean, and the big thing is, like, I'm not saying we have to stop being cancer survivors or stop being who we are.
Right.
But what I'm saying is, like, we have to deal with doctor's appointments. But if you're avoiding just basic care for yourself, there's something wrong with that. Like,
Right.
you didn't survive to, like, avoid going to a GP or, a gynae appointment or insert every medical thing that you have. That's ultimately not going to help you because you're operating from a traumatic event still, and you're still in survival and you're avoiding it because you don't want to deal with it. And I get that. I've been there where I'm like, I don't want to really actually schedule that. So I'm going to wait for it as long as I possibly can. Right?
That's me. I hate the doctors.
Yeah. And I mean, I have literally had panic attacks in doctor's appointments and walked out.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yeah. I walked out of more than I'd like to admit.
Yep. And I know why I don't like them. And it's a trauma response. All my life growing up, I was always, I'm going to be a little bit vulnerable here, but I was always teased about my weight, and I was never heavy growing up. But I was thick, but I was all like, my brothers would call me names. And then, in teenage years, people would call me fat and all this stuff. And so, that's what I was always told. Oh, you're fat, you're ugly, this, da, da, da. And I'm like, oh, okay. So then you go to the doctor, and because I am overweight, they want to categorize me as obese. Yeah. And then they say, oh, well, because you're heavy and you're this and that, whatever else under the sun. And then they're like, well, now you have a higher risk for heart disease or lung disease, or now you have, a higher risk for diabetes and all this. And I say, oh, really? So this is what I say to them finally. Now that I'm trying, but I still hate going to the doctor. Like, I was sitting here going, but before I'm like, I really do need to schedule. But I'm glad that you said that, because it's like, my husband says siblings and teenagers are brutal, and they are. And so it does. I mean, you don't realize when they say that the impact that they have. And so you carry that with you. And so I finally said to my doctor, like, look, I may be a little overweight, and that's perfectly fine, but I am healthy. Like, I'm not going to allow you to put all of this negativity, now that I realize that, back into me. And so you can say all these things, but I know people that are very thin that have a lot more health problems than I do. And so I tell them, you know what, I'm big, but I'm not big, but but I'm like, I'm beautiful, and I accept myself. And my husband will tell you, it's taken me a long time to say that I love myself. I accept myself, and I'm beautiful. But that is one of the reasons I think that maybe a lot of people do shy away from it, is because it is like, we remember the traumatic experiences and exactly what you just said. So I wanted to say that because I'm one of them, and, and I hate going. I hate it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like, it's a really common, I mean, I remember doctor's appointments from when I was little still that were very traumatic at that point to me. And, it's like going to the dentist and having a bad experience. You don't forget it, and you avoid it because you had such an awful experience. It's the same thing. But that phobia is somehow accepted versus the doctor is not. It's so weird how our society does that too. And it's like, no, like, there are sometimes practitioners who mean well, but they don't say the right thing. They're not taught how to compassionately talk to people.
No, they're not.
No, they're not. Like, literally, they are not. Like, I was a part of this research panel for I think it was the University of Florida, and it was teaching med students how to compassionately talk to patients. And it was so eye-opening to see these really brilliant people from all over from all over the country, and they just didn't know how to interact with people. Like basic, like, hello, how are you? Like, it was mind blowing. And so I get where they're coming from, but they need that compassionate care development, and language matters. Language matters.
Absolutely, it does. It does. And it does. I mean, I even catch myself in session saying something. I was like, oh, that wasn't very trauma informed. But, and it goes back, and then I was like, it's okay. But, but whatever. So, yeah. So my husband, I do have to share this story, and he brought it up. So I have to, and he says, and dangling from a fence by the armpit doesn't help either. So yeah. So it does go back to, I do got to share this story with you because we're talking about traumatic experiences. We're talking about why we don't like to go to the doctors and all of that. So yeah, he had to bring this up. I wasn't thinking he would, but it's okay. So I was probably about 4 years old. I'm thinking I was, and it's funny. I always tell people this. I can't remember what I ate for dinner, but I can remember 44 years ago. So it's okay. So I still remember what I was wearing. I remember going out into my backyard. And so I have 2 older brothers, and obviously the youngest of 2, I would watch them be boys and climb up fences and do all this and all that stuff. And so I remember saying to my mom, hey mom, can I go outside and play? And she said, yeah, well, it just got done raining. And I still remember, yes, I will tell her that too. So I still remember like the old disc swings hanging from the tree. So I still remember those, and like, I still remember we had a, what was the inchworm ride? I can't think of what it is, but anyway, that goes to show you how old I am. And so anyway, I kicked the ball over the fence, and I thought, oh, well, instead of going around the driveway and around, I'm just going to climb the fence. Well, I climbed the fence, and I slipped and I fell, and I got hooked on the fence. And it's the chain link fence that's like this, and it doesn't have the top on it. And so, yeah. So, I thought I only cut my stomach, and then like I have a scar here and a scar on my stomach. So I was like, yeah, I only cut there. And so this might be some details from somebody, so I apologize. But so I ran in the house crying, and my mom's like, what's the matter? And I said, well, I hurt my wrist and my stomach. And she said, well, I'm going to put you up in the wash machine, lift up, and lift up your shirt. Well, when she did, her thumb went in my armpit. I literally had ripped, I had literally ripped my whole entire armpit out. And so it's by the grace of God that I am alive today. The doctor said there's literally no way I could have lifted myself off the fence because of the way I was hooked. And so I remember him telling me, you had to have had a guardian angel lifting you off the fence. Somebody or something lifted me off that fence. And so I ended up getting 42 stitches. There were stitches inside and outside. And luckily, it didn't bleed much. I remember that. And I remember the doctor saying, you're so lucky that you were able to get off the fence when you did, because you were like an inch or 2 away from your main artery in your arm, and you probably would have sat on the fence and died. Sorry, I know that was a little bit too much information, but this is where the traumatic circumstance, I wanted to give you a little bit of background. Most people know this. So, when you have an injury and they tell you to put the gauze on it and you got to put all that nasty tape on there and stuff. Well, I remember, and I still remember, it makes me cringe. It's like, oh, I hate it. So I'm always like, I hope none of my kids, I'm praying like, I don't want any of my kids to get hurt. And my mom would say, I have to take the bandage off and clean it. And I would run and hide, and she wouldn't find me. That was the most painful time. And you talk about traumatizing as well, as when she had to rip that gauze pad off with all that surgical tape stuff. Oh, it just makes me now. But that was one of the things, and I remember. And so I'm like, what? So let me just go on again, because I didn't learn my lesson. It wasn't too long thereafter. My middle brother and I were playing cops and robbers, and I was chasing him up a fence, and I thought, oh, I can climb this fence. Meanwhile, this fence was probably 20 feet high. I get to the top, climb over, think, oh, I'm good. Guess what happens? I slice my thumb. So by then, sorry, I didn't mean to steal the show, but
this is wild.
So I remember running and hiding and saying, my mom's going to kill me. My mom's going to kill me. My mom's going to kill me. And my brother's panicking. And so finally I went in, and obviously I had to go get stitches and all that stuff too. But since then, I have never climbed a fence. Well, maybe once. I hate fences. And so I don't like doctors. probably because of that reason too, and because of the other factors and stuff. But people don't think of those things, and so I think it's very important that these physicians become trauma informed on what to say. There needs to be more empathy. There needs to be more sympathy, and they need to really sit down to us and give us, not saying, you got to be hunky dory in your way that you're speaking to us by any means. No, but if you can just be a little bit more gentle and not so harsh.
Correct. Yes, I agree.
I know. I'm like, I shouldn't say hate. Hate is a strong word. I dislike the doctors a lot.
Right?
Yes.
Like, and I've made peace with it. Like, I can go back to the hospital at any time now, but it's because of the work that I've done to be able to do that. In the beginning I did, like I shared, have panic attacks, leaving hospitals. I was clinically diagnosed with PTSD.
Oh.
And for me now to go into a doctor's appointment and just be like, yeah, I'm here. What do you need? Like, what's going on? Like, how are you?
Right.
Not like, it doesn't affect me in the same way. Like, I had, for example, like this last January, I had a colonoscopy that came back with some polyps that were abnormal. So they wanted me to do a follow-up. And throughout this whole time, everyone around me is like genuinely concerned, rightfully so. And I'm like, I promise you it's nothing. Like, I genuinely don't think there's anything wrong. I'm not worried. And the thing is, like, if it's cancer, like, I know how to do that. So I'm okay.
Yep.
And so I did my follow-up and it came back again negative. And now I have to go back every year. But, my dad, I could see the look on his face and how it affected him. And like, as soon as I found out, he was like, I could hear the voice change and like all these things that people are genuinely concerned about. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm good. Like, what's next? This is annoying. I have to go do this again. Like, it's
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And it is. And what's people don't understand, it's the mindset change.
Mm-hmm.
So you were able to learn to change your mindset to maybe not accept it, but to say, I'm not going to let this beat me. I'm going to beat it if this is what it is. Because most people, and we've seen it in the beginning when we started talking with your diagnosis and the things, when people waller in their emotions and the things that they're going through, yes, you have every right to do that. But there has to come a time when you say, okay, I have to pick myself up.
Yeah.
And say, okay, we don't know when the day is, but hey, I have to pick myself up and know that I'm going to be okay.
Right.
And, and stuff. And so that's what it sounds like that you really did. You had that that mind shifting and you were like, yep, nope, I'm not going to let this get me.
No, I that's absolutely true. And I think that comes from because I kept relapsing so much that when we ran out of things to try and we wrote the letter of compassion to the FDA and drug manufacturer for compassionate care for an immunotherapy that wasn't even for my cancer. This is like truly shouldn't be here. I just said, oh, I get it. Like, I just have to be alive for the next thing and the next thing that comes out and the next thing. So like, literally, it's just a matter of like, endurance and like physically keeping your body as best you can and mentally and emotionally and keeping everything on track. I was like, I can do that. So it's that shift.
It is. And that's why you're so inspirational, because a lot of people don't look at it like that. They, that's why I said a lot of them get so down in their thoughts and they don't know how to get out of there. So, you're such an inspiration to show people, look at, and I, look at the things that I've endured, and it was rough. Absolutely. But then look at, I was able to climb that ladder to get out, and look at what I'm doing today.
Right.
Yep.
Like it's
and that's huge.
Yeah. It definitely isn't something that I don't know if you can teach it to someone, but it inherently was always instinctual for me because I didn't have anybody guiding the way or giving me hope or inspiration along the way. It was just like every day, like, what are you going to do to help yourself? It wasn't like I made it a point, beds are for sleeping. to, if I wanted a nap, it was on the couch. Like, you were getting up, you were doing the things that you needed to do to take care of yourself, and you weren't sitting in the muck. You weren't allowing that to take over. Were there moments of pity? Of course, but
Absolutely.
I wouldn't allow myself to stay there.
Yep. And that's the important thing. You know, you should be able to, you know, allow yourself that time. But it's realizing, okay, when is enough to get yourself out of that hole and start climbing that ladder.
Right. Right.
And that's why I told you, like, you're such an inspiration. And that's why, you know, I was, you know, so honored to have you on here, because it's like, you know, people need to hear that. Not, I mean, I could get on here and speak all the time and people are like, oh yeah, whatever. But it's better when somebody else is reiterating things and have, you know, lived, you know, trauma in maybe different ways, and said, okay, yeah, I had self-pity for a while, even if you did it for 30 days, but on that 31st day or whatever it was, you're like, you know what? No, I don't want to be here anymore. And, you know, and it's saying, you know what, it's okay to do those things, but you also have to get up and move up that ladder.
Right. And and again, that probably comes from even further back of like my childhood of like, you don't get to decide who I am. You don't get to, I know you're trying to tell me who I am, but I'm not listening, and I'm not conforming just because you want me to. And like that, just knowing that's so deeply ingrained in you, somewhere inside of me at least, that I wasn't going to let anyone outside of me dictate the terms. And that included with cancer. And I was like, you know, I'm not able to do a lot of the things that I want to. Like, I'm missing out on, like I said, birthdays, weddings, my friends birthing children, and life, and all of these things. But I can't change that. What can I change was always the question. What can I do? What can I do to participate? Like, anybody would have given me like the pass to just sit in bed every single day and not do anything. But I was like, that doesn't help me. It doesn't help anyone around me. I'm like, I can't be that person.
Mm-hmm.
It's not my DNA to be that person.
No, absolutely not. There was something I was going to say. That's what I mean. Like, I get these thoughts and I was like, ooh, it just kind of goes out.
Right.
It's okay. And maybe it'll come back to me. It's fine. Sometimes like I should write things down and I'm like, it's okay. So tell us about your, breath work. You do breath work, you do somatic movements. You can tell us about your certifications, kind of, you know, implementing the things that you do, how you work with clients, whatever you want to share surrounding your business wise.
Yeah. So I'm a personal trainer. I'm a cancer exercise specialist. I'm a nutritionist. I'm a somatics IQ therapist. I am a yoga teacher, yoga for oncology, restorative yoga, yoga for trauma informed coach. Like, everything that I've done has like been selfishly to figure myself out, but you know, my clients benefit from that. I will say the most transformative thing that I've done is it's the breath work. That the somatic movement and breath work honestly have moved the needle the most. Like I referenced earlier, the disconnection from going to medical appointments and going, do whatever you want. Like, that's literally, I said that out loud more times than I'd like to say or could count. But there is so much disconnection where you don't even feel like you can say no to somebody in an exam room touching you or asking to feel your pulse, you know, just even get your blood pressure, right? So it was through somatic movement, and yoga is a somatic movement. It's getting into the body. Was really something that I started to do during treatment because it was the only other thing besides walking that I could do. That really helped me start that path. And then once I got done with treatment, after I had my nervous breakdown, I was struggling with like, well, what else? What makes me feel good, and what can I do more of? And yoga made me feel good. It was the only time where I wasn't thinking about being a cancer survivor, wasn't thinking about cancer. I wasn't thinking about anything other than being with me. And so I just was like, I need to lean into that. I went and got my certification for yoga, and I started to really relearn what this body could do for me and was doing for me, even though I felt like it betrayed me. I felt like it was trying to kill me
Right.
a lot. And I was like, well, how can I trust this body again if it's trying to kill me for 5 years to do that? And like, so that it was slowly building that self-awareness of like, my body is strong, it is capable, and I see it now. And then the somatic breath work just really was like the icing on the cake that I didn't know I needed. So it's not the same as like holotropic breath work like Sam Goff, which is like 3 hours of intense breathing. It's not that. And it's not Wim Hof, which is like more breathing for strengthening your immune system and things like that. This breath work is specifically designed to get into, because you referenced the book earlier, The Body Keeps the Score, of all these traumatic experiences getting stuck in here in our being, which I wholeheartedly agree with you. Breath work helps us turn off our analytical mind, our logical thinking brain, and reconnect to our innate intelligence inside of our body. And this encourages clearing out stress and stagnant energy through emotional expression. And oftentimes that results in feelings of like relaxation and mental clarity, and having these intense sessions that just you feel like, I didn't know what I needed until I got it. And so for me personally, like I have dealt with a lot of chronic pain since treatment. And I was doing a breathwork session, and my chronic pain traveled from my hip to my shoulder, and it was becoming very debilitating for me. Like I was not sleeping. I was like, Tylenol's not working. What's wrong? Like, why is it getting worse? I'm not doing anything differently. And this was like for about a week stretch. Then finally on like a Saturday morning, I called my one friend, Sarah, and I just said, I need to Zoom with you whenever you get the chance. Just let me know. She goes, okay, give me like 30 minutes, an hour or something, and we'll connect. So we get on Zoom with her. I go, I can't even look at you what I'm about to tell with you. I started sobbing. I looked down and I just let out this, I wouldn't even call it a secret. I've never thought about it in like 20 years, just word vomit out of me. And as soon as she heard it and she just held space for me, an hour later, the pain was gone and hasn't been back since.
Oh, wow.
Yep. All because of a traumatic experience that I experienced over 20 years ago that I literally forgot about and didn't think about since then.
Wow.
Was stirred back up and word vomited out of me.
Wow. Isn't that something?
And, that's personally what I've experienced.
Yes.
And, there's varying degrees, but, we carry stress with us all the time. We pick it up from day to day. It's like, this is just clearing out that stress and getting it out of us so we can, be our best authentic selves, and it can be, they call it a bottom up approach instead of a top down approach. And because after reading The Body Keeps the Score and everything that Gabor Mate has written, and Walking with the Tiger, like all these books that reiterate stress causes repression and depression and eventually disease, like, and then linking specific chronic illnesses with specific things in our lives. And I'm like, you can't unsee it.
No. Mm-mm. And you can't. And it's like, holy mackerel. And another thing that I want to add too is that what's huge is well, here my husband has a question, and then I'll finish because I'll probably forget what I'm going to say. So let me finish and then I'll ask the question. So I did a video on YouTube about trauma survivors holding their breath.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the biggest things, and you may want to speak about this, I wanted to bring it up because a lot of us do. So breath work is huge for helping people learn to breathe.
I would agree. So like the first thing when you feel anxious or you're scared, you forget to breathe. You stop. You actually, your muscles tighten around your neck. So your pathways are actually constricting. and being restricted. So I always say, are you breathing? And most people, once they realize that, they're like, I'm not. I'm like, how long have you not been breathing? Like, yes, you're breathing because you're alive, but you're not breathing, which means your brain isn't getting oxygen, which means you can't cognitively think, you can't process things. Like all the things that we need to function, your brain's not doing.
Mm-hmm.
So getting into our breath and taking really big, deep inhales and really long exhales, like can that in and of itself, that simple thing can change moments, years, lives for ourselves.
Mm-hmm. And people don't realize that.
Yeah.
They don't. And I know there's some people that can't do it, or maybe they choose not to do it. But I remember doing that YouTube video, and it was just huge, saying like how many of us don't even realize like you're not breathing, and that's exactly what it is. And I'm like, you really need to start doing some deep breathing exercises, and because as you know, as a breathwork facilitator, that most trauma survivors breathe up here. We don't even breathe at the bottom, like belly breathing, but breathe at the bottom. And so doing those exercises actually helps you to breathe at the bottom. And I remember going to the lung doctor, and the lung doctor was saying to me, like, you need to deep breathe, because this is what they told me is like the bottom parts of your lungs will start deteriorating, and then they won't work efficiently. And so all your bronchioles and bronchi and all that stuff, they'll just kind of, I don't want to say die off, but they may. And so now you don't have that lower part of your lungs to work on. So, breath work is a huge thing, especially for trauma survivors.
Yeah, 100%.
Yes. So we have a couple questions for you.
Sure.
Sly Fox says, how do you wish to inspire more people to keep pushing in life?
So it's partly by getting in front of audiences like yours and trying to just spread the message as much as possible. It's getting on into bigger stage and impacting more lives. That's truly the goal of what I would love to do. And hopefully that's where it starts to head. I oftentimes, for like the last few years until like the last two, kind of minimized what I had went through and been like, it's fine. Like I didn't go through a lot, but truly like everything that I went through is a lot. And when and I say this because for the first time, I did all my treatment in Chicago. I'm now in Santa Barbara, California, and I'm meeting new people since September. And so I'm having to tell them, and I see the looks on their face change and the reactions. And I'm like, oh, I actually have been through something quite life-changing and quite like people don't mind-boggling. It's like literally mind-boggling. They're like, but you look so healthy. And I'm like, well, first of all, appearance is not an indicator of health. But, yeah. But yes, I am a healthy person now. And no, you wouldn't have guessed that I went through all that based on what you see here.
Yep.
Outside.
Correct.
They don't see the inside stuff.
Yep. Yeah. And people don't. I mean, that's appearances. Yeah. It's like, wow, okay. You have no idea. Do you do group? Gabby, I'll ask you a question in just a second. So when you work with clients, are you currently working with clients?
Yes, I am. I currently have clients. So I work with clients either one-on-one or in a group format.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, how you work with them and stuff like that. So Gabby's question, it says, you mentioned yoga. What is your opinion on dancing or martial arts as a form of somatic healing for trauma survivors?
Oh my gosh. So I freaking love dancing. I've honestly never done martial arts, so I cannot speak to its efficacy, but I think anytime you're in your body and out of your brain and using movement, it can absolutely be healing. But dancing actually as a somatic practice has been researched and proven to absolutely help aid so much of the disconnection that we feel. Like you can see when somebody has been through something, you can't even move your hips in the same way. And I can speak to that personally is like, I was like, oh, I'm dancing. And I watched a video of me and I'm like, I don't even move my hips. There's just a lot of shoulder movement. What's happening? That's not dancing. And to whereas now I'm like, oh, I can sway my hips again. Like,
Yes.
oh, so, and I think especially if you have had sexual trauma in your life, it's the hips that really just become tight. The pelvis area, all of it becomes a lot more rigid than the rest of the body. And I think that dancing is underutilized for what it can do and how it's used. Like the number one thing that you can do, the quickest actually number one thing that you can do to get out of your head and into your body at any given moment is to start shaking. Just start tapping the heels and start shaking. Do that for like, you don't even need to do it that long and you immediately are back here.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's crazy. It's wild.
Oh, isn't that neat?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know that either. That's good.
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I've done some well, I don't remember what it was called, but where I can't even think of what it is, and you do the movements that you do, and then it's like the shaking. It's a portion of getting because the trauma does sit, it's trap trauma, but it sits on the cellular level, and stuff like that too. And you mentioned, like the sexual abuse, and it actually, we have a muscle called the psoas muscle.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm sure you're familiar with that too, especially being a yoga instructor. And so that's where that muscle can only really be reached. And this is really important. It can only be reached through doing stretches like yoga or, some other stretches, the deep stretches, because you can't, if you just do regular stretching, you cannot reach it. And so that's a part of what I'm learning, that I have a lot of chronic back pain. And so a lot of chronic back pain, a lot of hip pain, and like my whole pelvic girdle. And so, and I was like, man, and it's like, I can feel the tension in my hips and my legs. And so, that's another huge aspect to what you do. I mean, it's for trauma survivors as a whole, but if they're looking for, if you have that chronic back pain, and all of that type of stuff, it's good to practice, that type of stretching and things like that too, to help loosen all that stuff up.
Absolutely. Like our body is, I mean, if you think about what happens when you are being traumatized, you immediately tense and tighten up, whether you realize it or not, it's happening. And, that's why I always say like PTSD is a little bit complicated because it's your body's reaction, your brain's naming it. So we have to get here. We can't outthink PTSD. We can't outthink fear. We can't outthink anxiety. Like we need to get here so our body stops reacting and our brain naming it. Like we don't feel anxiety in our head first. Everyone I ask is like, I feel it here or in my gut or here. I'm like, okay, if you feel it there first, why are we using just one modality to try and fix it?
Right.
It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't. And so, I mean, you said the bottom up. Is that what you do?
Bottom up approach. Yeah.
Okay. So we do a side door approach for complex trauma, and it's a lot of trauma informed movement.
Yeah.
And then like the progressive muscle relaxation, there's other things, but so it's just interesting, but they all, whether you're doing, the bottom up side door, whatever you're doing, they all have meaning, and they're, and they all have their ability to help each and every one of us, and as a healing strategy. So, and that's why I tell people, like, if you don't like, dancing, I love dancing, and I'll come out here and dance my butt off in my workplace. It's kind of like a living room in my office in the back, but I kind of tell my clients that too. Have a dance party. Yeah. Put your music on and just dance around like a lunatic. It's all right. Nobody's going to see anyway, and it's fine. Right? But it's like that's what it is. So yeah. So dancing, martial arts. Gabby is actually opening up a nonprofit in the state of Indiana to help trauma survivors, because as a trauma survivor herself, she was on, I don't know, a few weeks ago, she was on and kind of shared her story and a lot of the things that she's doing. But she's trying to get businesses to come in and help trauma survivors, because a lot of times, because coaches don't accept insurance and things like that, to help maybe youth and trauma survivors to be able to come in and utilize some of their services and stuff like that, and then be able to say, until she gets up and going. And so she uses another form of, healing. That's why she asked about the dancing and the martial arts and stuff like that too. And because that's huge. It's a huge step in kind of dancing is part of, I believe, part of like a trauma-informed movement. Because like you said, it's taking away, not only are you dancing and you're moving, but it's taken away and you're distracted by what are you learning? So you can learn the steps and things like that too. So it's huge.
Right. I feel like also of how to look at it is like the more you're in a space where you're feeling it, because you're feeling the music, your body's responding to the beat, the rhythm, pattern, the lyrics, all of it. You're not thinking. You're out of your head.
Right. Yep. That's why I love coming out, having a dance party. I put my music on. I just dance around. I'm like, oh, this is, and it's nice.
It's great.
Yep. And so, and then, like I belt out the music and I'm like, oh, there you go. It helps me.
It does. Like even if it's 3 minutes at a time, like, hey.
Yep. And things like that. And it's a, that's why I do this, because there's so many of us that have been through things. And now we're looking at the different healing strategies that we use to help us and how we're literally using those to help other people. And there's so many, like I'm learning so many different things. It's like, oh my goodness. So, so many things that people are doing. And Gabby said, animals will shake as a way to redirect their stress too.
Yep. It's what they do every time they're frustrated. And I see my dog do it all the time. And I just giggle now because now I know why she's doing it. Yeah.
So I'll have to, my husband will see it, but that's interesting because our dog shakes and stuff like that too. So now I'll be like, oh, well, she must be stressed.
Right. Like, what's happening?
Yep. I'll be like, oh, well, so yeah, it's just interesting though. I mean, that Gabby loves animals, and I think she went to school for animals too, something to do with animals, I think, but she's a huge animal lover. So yeah, well, that's good, Gabby. Thank you for sharing that, because I had no idea about that anyway. Yeah. So that's actually pretty good too. So yeah. So anything else you'd like to share with us?
Just that, we need more people in the world like you and I, and especially the collective now needs more stories of hope and inspiration. And I do believe the way in which we learn is through our own journeys to teach others. Like that's the story's oldest time, right? Like before books and things were invented, it's all through story and something that somebody experienced and figured out a new way of doing things and passing it down to somebody else and sharing. It's so important. And I always think that everyone's got a story to tell. They just need to tell it. And everyone, if you're an adult living in this time, everyone's had some sort of trauma experience. You can't go through this life in today's age and not have had some sort of experience, whether it's big T trauma or little T trauma.
Right.
It's, but yeah. And I think the more that I have shared about some of the traumas that I've been through, especially like in my childhood, the more people are like, I had the same thing. Oh my God. Like, it's like you're connecting dots that people are just like, whoa.
Yeah. And I don't think people statistically realize how many of us have gone through things in our childhood. I mean, I remember sitting at church and we were talking about like you had to get to know people and they wanted you like, oh, share part of your testimony. And I was like, yeah, I don't really want to do this at church. Okay. So I just kind of shared a little bit of the version. And I kid you not, 5 out of 6 of us had a lot of childhood trauma. And I was like,
right.
And it made me realize that, that we're needed. Yeah. We're definitely needed. Whether you coach faith, non-faith, it doesn't matter, but we're needed because that was literally just sitting at one table.
Yeah.
With 6 people. And I was just like, holy mackerel. And then to see the intergenerational piece come in because, and then they went on to say, oh, well, these types of things happen to our grandchildren. And it was like, oh, yeah. So we are very much needed in the things that we're doing. And I agree, sharing your story and letting people know.
Yeah, because here's the thing, Gina, like we all need to share more and more, because I didn't even know until I started going to therapy specifically for cancer that what I experienced as a child was considered and labeled abuse. My therapist at the time literally goes, "That's abuse." And I was like, "Is it?" I like questioned her authority, and she goes, "Yes." She goes, "How is that not?" And I go, "I guess I never thought about it because it's just something I went through, and like I thought everyone did. Not that everyone did, but like because I saw friends that didn't, but I didn't know it wasn't okay." That's like the really messed up part.
Yep. And it was the same thing for me. It wasn't until in my 20s that I went, and I only went because I think I was having relationship issues with my first husband, I believe. And I went and started talking about things, and she's like, "Yeah, you've been doing a lot of childhood trauma." I'm like, "What's that?" And then, she started telling me, I'm like, "Holy mackerel." And then it was through, I went to her off and on for years, but it was like, wow, okay. Like I knew it wasn't normal, but it was like, yeah, it was just an everyday part. Like, okay, like this is kind of normal. And until she's like, "No, this is definitely not normal," I was like, holy mackerel. Well, then I remember being like 30, I think it was about 37, 38 when I lost my sense of self. So that's when complex trauma, between 36 and 38, I believe, is the age frame of complex trauma when it starts rearing its ugly head. And so I believe I was about 38 when I lost my sense of self. So people, and why I say that is because a lot of people be like, "Oh, I have PTSD and what, and stuff like that." And then it's like, "Oh, why all of a sudden am I in my late 30s?" And now I'm like, "Oh, what's going on with me?" Right. And so I ended up losing my sense of self later on. But I think I lived in a dissociated state for so long. And I think most of us do. And then all of a sudden, I don't know if it's just a part of, we're starting to settle down maybe in our late 30s, and we're like, and then all of a sudden it's like, "Oh, no, you're not." No. And so that's really when I really started discovering something is really wrong with me. Like the after effects are really starting to come on now. And maybe when she said, "Oh, you're a childhood trauma," and you may have had the same thing, but it was like, I didn't have that aha moment. Like I just didn't. And I remember, my husband says, "Lord, forgive me." But I was a stubborn ass and kept pushing you to get better. And he did, because I was actually ready to leave. And I remember him saying, I've never seen my husband cry. I'm gonna put him on the spot, but I remember him crying and saying, "Gina, I don't know why you're leaving." And I said, "I'm taking the kids and I'm leaving. Like I don't even know who I am anymore." Yeah. And I remember he said, "Who are you running from? Who are you running from?" And I said, "I'm not running from anybody." He said, "Yes, you are." Yeah. "Who are you running from?" He said, "Because when you leave, whoever you're running from is going to follow you." And it was in that moment I realized he was right. And I was like, wow, he's my rock. And, we just celebrated 21 years together. And I said to him, "Oh, you're my peanut butter." Yeah, "You're my peanut butter. I'm your jelly." So yeah, so it's Gabby, I'll ask her your question in just a minute. Now I don't remember. I just said that now. I was like, "Oh, where are we going with this?"
About recognizing that at later stages in life, it comes back up.
It did. And then Gabby, I'll ask you a question, I promise. So my therapist said to me, "Read The Body Keeps the Score." And I said, "Oh, okay, I'll read The Body Keeps the Score." And it was in that moment that I realized that it was my trauma that affected my body. That's when the after effects of trauma really were invading and roaring their ugly head. And I have read the book. It's probably been, it had to have been probably 5-6 years ago that I read the book. Mm-hmm. And I have developmental trauma, so my brain is kind of wonky. That's why sometimes I talk and I was like, okay, yep, no, it'll come back around. But I remember reading the book, and it was probably 2 years ago, sitting in this office and saying, I was sitting here and I was like, oh, the body keeps the score. And it was 4 years, about 3-4 years later. And finally it dawned on me, the body keeps the score. The body keeps that's what that book means. The body keeps the score. I'm like, you talk about, like, I felt like a goober. I'm like, how many people read that book and never realized what it meant? Because I was one of them. Like, I read it, but I think I read it on the terms of, I was reading it to figure out what was wrong with me. And I didn't care that the trauma was stored on my cellular level and in my body right now. I wanted to figure out what was wrong with me.
Right.
And so, like you, I ended up going on this journey to get better and to help other people, so that came later on, but, and to helping people. That was not what I wanted to do. I did this to help me. It was God that led me to do it, to help other people.
Right.
Yep. So Gabby wants to ask a question, and she said, what certifications do you have again? I missed it. You're such an inspiration.
I have a lot, so I'll start from the beginning again. I'm a certified personal trainer, a cancer for exercise specialist, a yoga instructor, a yoga for trauma instructor, a yoga for oncology, a restorative yoga instructor, a personal trainer, I said that already, a nutritionist, a somatics IQ therapist, a NICBM trauma-informed coach, and I actually am certified in happiness, and I literally took that as a joke, but was very valid. And I'm also a Reiki level 1 healer. So that's everything. I think I didn't forget anything. I don't know.
That's a lot.
Yeah. It takes a second to like recall it all.
Yes. It's like, oh my goodness. It's like, oh, it's so good.
Yeah.
So good. Oh, I'm trying to figure out. Hold on.
But,
whoops. Give me just a second. Oh, goodness gracious.
All good.
I'm like all of a sudden it just like, where on earth did my Zoom go?
Oh.
Or my StreamYard. I'm like, where's my, oh my goodness. Like all of us. Oh, I'm like, where did my StreamYard go? I'm like, oh my goodness. It was like, I was trying. Yeah, I was like Zoom. I meant StreamYard. Well, I pulled up my tool while you were doing it. Every time I do not every time, but most of the time when I do a live, I like to give away a little something, and so I was like, where'd my thing go? Like, I'm such a dork. So let me just get my hashtag. And
I wrote a book. I forgot about that.
Oh, you did?
I did. I wrote a book. It's called Finding My Way Back to Heart Center. Cancer Treatment Ended, Now What? And it's not,
that's right.
Yeah. I always kind of forget about that because, and the reason why I say that is not to like minimize that I wrote a book, but it's like, it didn't feel like it was work when I wrote it. It literally, my fingers couldn't type fast enough and it just poured out of me. And so everyone always says that it's hard to write a book, and I'm like, is it? Because like that's not like it sounds terrible, but that's not the experience that I had. I couldn't get it out fast enough. Is kind of how it went for me, right. And so it was like a download. It was like, this is it, and now you just have to put it on paper.
That's right. So there is our hashtag. There we go. Okay. So Scott said, absolutely amazing, Casey. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Scott.
So my t-shirts are floating around here somewhere. So it's hashtag survivor.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have this t-shirt, and then this is the back.
It's beautiful.
And then I have this t-shirt, so they'll get their choice. And then I have one that says warrior. Kind of gives the definition of what a warrior is. I do have some other ones, but I have those 3.
Those are great.
Thank you. So my business name used to be Beautiful Flawed Warrior Coaching. because I'm a beautiful, flawed warrior. I'm beautiful,
Yep.
I'm flawed, and I'm a warrior. No matter what happens, I have chose to get back up. And so, oops. And so I have always said, like, so that was my business name for the longest time. And then on the back of it's the warrior woman. It's got the cross in it and stuff like that. Well, then I was like, I just feel like the neuroscience portion of what I'm learning and implementing, that a lot of men are left in the breeze. And so I feel I'm not there yet, but I'm transitioning. So I changed my business name. I rebranded a lot of things. So I can actually start eventually working with men and things like that too. And so, we'll kind of see what happens. But so my new business name is Rise Up from Trauma Coaching, and stuff like that too. So it's one of those things that's, like I said, I'm not there yet, but I'm implementing what needs to be done in order to, when it does come, when the time does approach for me to start working with them and things like that too. So, but regardless, it's still we're all beautiful, flawed, and warriors in our own sense, or warriors in our own sense. And so my clothing line, I was doing a lot of events and doing my clothing line, and I wrote a book and all, workbook and things. And so now it's just like, there's other things that I want to focus on. And so that clothing line is like, it's like, yeah, I'm okay. I'm going to start getting rid of my clothing line now and start opening up to do more things and utilize more things. And so I'm not a professional. I like doing t-shirts for myself, and I'll do them for family, friends, or whatever, which is perfectly fine. But as a recovering perfectionist, and I say that, and giggle because, I am a recovering perfectionist. If something's not right, I'll redo it over. See, you're one too. I will redo it over and over. And I thought, I don't have time to continue to do these and stuff like that too. So let me just say anyone else. So I don't have, so I'm just like, I really want to focus on doing the trauma work and things like that too, and really helping people on that too. So yeah. Another thing I want to say is Gabby and Casey and myself, we will be speakers at a mental health conference. It's virtually. I believe it's October 25th and 26th. It'll be virtual. And oh, Charles, be quiet. So so this is what he said. How many times did you change your book, Gina? Yeah, 4 times. Okay. That's the perfectionist in me. It was 4 times. But yeah, so we will be speaking virtually at a conference. It'll, anybody can attend. It'll be, as of right now, we have 3 keynote speakers and probably about 24 to 26 breakout and workshop sessions. Casey will actually be leading I believe, a breakout and a workshop session together, where she will talk about breath work and actually teach the class or stuff like that too. I know Gabby's going to be doing waltzing and some martial arts, and me, I'm kind of undecided because now what I thought I wanted to do, now I'm learning some other stuff, and I'm going, oh, I really like this. But the choices that I have is obviously the cognitive distortions, which is huge for me. ACEs and then geniograms. So those are the 3 biggest things, especially the ACEs score. A lot of people don't look at the ACEs score and attribute it to childhood trauma and the statistics of why the things happen to us and things like that too. So, all right. Well, let me see how many we, oh, Gabby, you were just in the nick of time. I was getting ready to spin it. She popped on. All right. Nobody else. We have 5. Nobody else. So I will just go ahead and draw. Good luck to everybody. Anna, she's so funny. That's my daughter. All right, Anna, do you want to? Well, all right, Anna, you can pick another t-shirt. I'm gonna pick somebody else because I think she won a couple weeks ago too, and she has yet to pick her t-shirt. So we're gonna draw again. We'll see. Linda. Congratulations. Yay. So how did I know? You can pick from the box on it. It's all right. So Linda, you let me know what shirt you have. And I have not mailed out your book and your other t-shirt. My apologies. I finally got it and got everything done so I can send it out to you. So you pick a shirt, whichever one you want. And I will send that with your other one. See, I knew there was a reason not to send it yet. Because see, now you want another one. So congratulations. Let me get that out of here. I'm still trying to learn all of this, like sharing and all. There we go. I'm still trying to learn how to share and all this stuff with the StreamYard. So, and stuff like that. So, so it was so good to listen to your story and hear you and kind of, just be there and listen, and how inspirational and empowering your story really is. And, again, it's reiterating that, people judge us based on the outside of us, and they look at that. But when deep down inside, it's like you should never judge a book by its cover. And I remember Gabby saying this at the conference, and she said the same exact thing. Like, if I would have walked in with a sign that said all of these things that I have gone through in my life, would you still, and this is no lie, would you still have accepted me or welcomed me? And when I tell you, and she'll even tell you this, when I tell you the room went heavy, the room went heavy. Yeah. And so it's always saying, you know what, you never know what somebody's gone through. So you know what, smile, be kind, and that smile could light up somebody's room or light up somebody's, their world, and things like that too. So I loved having you on here and the information that you shared, and as much as I'm so sorry that you had to endure the things that you did, but look at where you are today, and happy and healthy, and and making a difference in the lives of so many other people is huge. And so I'm honored to be able to stand with you at our conference, and to be able to have you there is huge. So I'm really looking forward to that as well.
Well, Gina, it's an honor, and it's my pleasure to not only come on here and have so much of your time and your energy, but also being invited to the conference. I'm beyond excited. I think that it's going to be amazing. And there's like some of the things that you were saying, I was like, I want to attend. Yeah. So I'm just really, 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 really thankful to be a part and even be asked and invited. Like, it's just, it's for that one person.
And absolutely. And I it's when you connect with somebody on the level that we connected on, like, you don't get that very often. And and the connection that we had, I was like, holy mackerel, like, this is like, it was odd because you don't. And I was like, yep. And just hearing, and I was like, yep, this story of needs to be heard. And a lot of the things that you're doing and the things that you've overcome. And so and there's so much, like, we'll talk, after, but there's so many different things. And I tell the speakers, like, there's so many things at the conference that you're going to want to utilize. And so it's really going to be worth it. So, so Sly Fox said, thank you for sharing your life with us, Casey. Linda said, thank you, Casey. Scott said, thank you, Casey. And I'm saying thank you as well. So it's been a wonderful night. Make sure, I didn't say this in the beginning, and now I know we're heading at the end. But if you guys could make sure that you like and share, for those of you that are new, if you could subscribe. We do this every Monday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on YouTube. And again, we do this so we get the word out, so we help other trauma survivors on their healing journeys, because it's not about recovery, it's about healing, and healing can be achieved through a lot of the things that we're teaching here on Rise Up from Trauma. So again, thank you, everyone. Thank you for being here. Again, thank you, Casey. And we will see you guys next Monday.